Let me begin at the beginning. My name is Emma, and I have an older sister named Sabrina. Growing up, Sabrina was always the golden child, the one who took chances, pursued dreams, and supposedly knew how to live life to the fullest. She married young, had two lovely daughters, and inherited at our grandmother's house. However, life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs at you, especially when family member is involved. Emma, you're so boring. At our family get-togethers, Sabrina would frequently say, "All you do is work and pay bills. Where's your sense of adventure?" I just shrugged it off. My house might not have been as impressive as her inherited property, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had my routine, my peace, and my independence. I worked hard, saved money, and eventually bought my own house with a mortgage using the $100,000 our grandmother left me as a down payment. I was in the middle of my weekend cleaning routine when Sabrina burst into my house one Sunday afternoon, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Emma, you won't believe the opportunity I found," she exclaimed, barely taking off her shoes before rushing into my living room. I knew that look in her eyes was the same look she had when she persuaded our parents to let her go backpacking through Europe at the age of 18, or when she decided to have a life change. It all began about 6 months ago. This time, I put aside my cleaning supplies and asked, "What is it?" She pulled out her phone and showed me some fancy presentations about this amazing medical startup that was revolutionizing the healthcare industry. "Tom and I were considering selling the house and investing in it. You should do the same." I stared at her, wondering if she was kidding. A destination wedding in Bali that almost bankrupted our parents. She rolled her eyes, saying, "A startup, don't be such a scaredy cat. This is a guaranteed return triple the investment in just 1 year. You could buy an even bigger house after that." "Sabrina, I don't know anything about medical startups or investments." I tried to reason with her, and I'm perfectly happy with my current house. She looked at me with that mix of disappointment and pity that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "This is why you'll always be stuck in the same place, Emma. You're just afraid to take risks to grow." I went to see our parents the day after Sabrina's visit in the hopes that they would talk some sense into her, but I should have known better because Mom was in the kitchen preparing her famous lasagna when I brought up the conversation with Sabrina, your sister. The conversation quickly descended into an argument, and Sabrina called me a loser for not seizing this incredible opportunity when I voiced my concerns about her risking her family's only home. Especially with two young daughters, told me about the investment opportunity, putting down her spatula and turning to face me with the expression I'd seen countless times growing up. "I'm disappointing you again. Why can't you be more like your sister?" "I think you should seriously consider it, Emma, Mom," she said, not even looking up from her cooking. She was talking about selling her house, her only house, and investing all that money in some startup we don't know anything about. Over the course of the following few weeks, I made every effort to persuade Sabrina to change her mind. We had numerous phone conversations that all ended the same way. "This is my chance to get rich quickly, Emma. Stop being such a party pooper. This is a legitimate investment opportunity. Have you even researched this company?" I asked during one of our calls, "Have you talked to a financial advisor?" But she refused to listen. Sold her home and used the majority of the proceeds to fund the medical startup. With the remaining funds, she and Tom took their daughters to the malls, where they rented a home while they awaited their dividends. Almost instantly, pictures began to appear on my phone. Sabrina on immaculate beaches, her daughters playing in glistening waters, sunset dinners by the sea, each with a caption that twisted the knife and told me that I was living my best life, while others were too afraid to pursue their dreams. During our weekly family dinners, our parents would look at Sabrina's most recent Instagram posts and say, "You see, Emma, Dad would say you could be there too if you weren't so careful all the time. Your sister really knows how to live." Mom would add, "It's not too late to join her. You know the investment opportunity is still open." I sat through these dinners quietly eating my food while they perused the pictures. Dreams. If you weren't such a chicken, sis. Sometimes I wondered if I was the only one who missed this incredible opportunity that they were all so excited about, but something in my gut told me that it was too good to be true. 6 months later, the mall photos stopped coming, and at first I thought maybe Sabrina had finally had enough of trying to make me jealous. Then, one morning, I saw the headlines about a medical startup that had been exposed as a massive fraud scheme that had thousands of. I tried calling Sabrina, but her phone was off, and Tom's was too. Finally, after 3 days of silence, I received a text from Mom saying, "Your sister is coming home." They arrived at our house. Investors lose everything in healthcare scam startup founders fleet country amid fraud investigation. My hand shook as I read the articles. The company Sabrina had gambled her entire future on was nothing but an elaborate scam. Mom called me 2 weeks later, and her voice sounded strainier than the proud tone she'd used when boasting about Sabrina's brave investment. "Emma, we need to talk," she said. Sabrina's designer clothes were replaced with wrinkled travel wear, and the girls looked exhausted. They'd spent every last penny they had from the house sale trying to maintain their lifestyle in the malls, believing until the very end that their investment would pay off. "Can you come over?" When I got there, the house was in disarray, with toys all over the place, suitcases still partially unpacked in corners, and my niece running around upstairs. Mom looked tired and said, "I can't do this anymore," as she slumped into a kitchen chair. "Our house is too small for all of us, and I haven't slept well in 2 weeks, and I'm always cleaning and cooking." Dad sat next to her, looking just as exhausted. "Emma, we hate to say it, but you have a large." Before they could finish, Sabrina entered the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy from crying, and the capable sister who had made fun of my uninteresting life choices was gone. In her place, I hardly recognized Emma, and she sobbed while holding my hands. "Tom and I will find jobs and save money for a place of our own, I swear, and we won't stay longer than that." I looked at my sister closely, and the pricey jewelry and designer clothes were gone, as was that smug smile. The first few weeks of having Sabrina's family in my home were interesting. I expected them to start looking for a job right away, but instead, they stayed at my house. She had worn in all those beach photos, and her daughters peeked around the doorframe, quiet and uncertain, so different from their usual bubbly selves. 3 months later, I finally said my bow firm, "Not a day more, and I mean it, Sabrina. Thank you, thank you." She put her arms around me, and I promised that I would have everything worked out by then, so you won't regret this. Became a kind of social hub with Sabrina and Tom's friends coming and going all the time. "We need to unwind," Sabrina explained, and one evening I discovered her and Tom in my living room drinking wine with their friends. "We also need to keep up our social connections because that's how you find good jobs." However, weeks went by and these connections weren't bringing in any jobs. Every morning when I left for work, I would find them still in their pajamas organizing another get-together, and every evening when I returned home, they were there. After a month of their stay, I finally asked Emma Tom, "When are you actually going to start looking for work?" He replied, scrolling through his phone, "We're still processing our trauma. We need time to gain strength." I thought this would be the turning point where they would start saving money for their own place, but I was mistaken. Instead, they began spending their salaries on what Sabrina called maintaining their. As the 3-month mark drew near, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. I found Sabrina in the kitchen ordering another exotic meal delivery on her phone, so I started talking to her about the high standard of living that had filled my kitchen with exotic ingredients I couldn't pronounce delivered by expensive specialty food services. "I can't just switch to regular food overnight," Sabrina explained while unpacking a $200 grocery delivery. "My body got used to certain things in the ma." Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Have you started looking for places to rent?" She looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, come on, Emma, don't be so pushy. We need more time to find the right place, more time." The agreement was 3 months, that was the deal. "Why are you being so selfish?" She frowned. "How many places have you actually looked at?" When my phone rang that evening, it was Mom Emma. I closed my eyes, feeling a headache coming on, and said, "Finally, 3 more months, but that's it. This is the last extension they're getting, and you're doing the right thing." To which Sabrina replied, accusingly, "I'm not kicking them out, Mom. The agreement was 3 months, and it's been 3 months. She has small children, Emma, so you can't just send them out on the street. What kind of sister are you?" When the utility bills came in that month, I almost had a heart attack because the numbers were more than 3 times what I usually paid. The water usage had increased. The electricity consumption had skyrocketed, and let's not even talk about the heating bills. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by bills doing calculations that made my head spin, and my mortgage payment was already substantial. I put down $100,000 from my grandmother's inheritance as a down payment, but the monthly payments were still substantial now that there were 4 more people living in the house. I hadn't budgeted for Sabrina's utilities, so I called out one evening, saying, "Bills in hand, we need to talk about these." She looked at the papers, then back at her phone, saying, "Oh, those look high. They're high, very high. I think it's reasonable that you and Tom help with them considering you're both working." She then gave me a look as though I had advised her to give up. Oxygen Emma, we're trying to save money for our own place. Keep in mind that we can't afford to pay our bills right now. Everything will work out, so stop worrying so much. However, I had a lot on my plate, and on top of that, I had somehow ended up working as an unpaid babysitter every weekday. It was the same exhausting routine. Our parents would pick up the girls from school and watch them until I finished work. And then, rather than going home to unwind, I would drive to our parents' house to pick up my nieces, then bring them back to my house. Sabrina and Tom were expected to arrive home by 6:00 p.m., so they needed help with their homework, make supper, and wait. However, they hardly ever showed up before 900 p.m. We apologized for being late. But Sabrina would arrive looking far too put together for someone who had reportedly been stranded at work. The meeting went long, and I completely understood it when I saw the Instagram photos their buddies shared about happy hour, cocktails, supper, and gatherings. Social gatherings, all of which included my sister and her husband, while I sat at home watching their kids. One especially late night, after they had finally come home and the girls were asleep, I confronted Sabrina once more about their plans to move out. I reminded her that the deadline for this extended stay was approaching, and I asked if she had begun looking for apartments. She waved her hand dismissively, saying, "Everything will be fine, Emma. You really need to stop stressing about everything that's not an answer." After 6 months of mounting bills, endless babysitting, and witnessing my sister and her husband treat my house like their personal resort, I decided it was time for one last time with her. She said, but she refused to meet my eyes. So I bit my tongue to avoid revealing all the times she had let me down. Instead, I watched her disappear upstairs to her room, my guest room in my house that I was paying for, while I sat surrounded by bills I couldn't afford and a growing resentment I couldn't contain. After the girls had gone to bed one evening, I called them both into the living room and said, "We need to talk." I sat across from them and said, "Next week marks exactly 6 months since you moved in, as we agreed. That's when you need to move out." I expected protests, explanations, and maybe even promises to start looking for a place right away. But what I didn't expect was laughter. Sabrina actually laughed, and she said, "Move out," still laughing. Sabrina looked at Tom with amusement before turning back to me, "But why would we move? The girls love it here, and let's be honest, this is good for you too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, "Emma. Of course you're getting real-life experience in taking care of a family, which is perfect practice for when you finally settle down and have kids of your own. You should be thanking us." I sat there in shock. The agreement was for 6 months, which was already double the initial time we discussed. They continued talking about future room arrangements and how we could make better use of the space. But I stopped listening when I realized something that should have been clear from the beginning. They had never intended to leave all the delays, excuses, and promises they had made. Tom nodded in agreement and spread his arms wide, saying, "This is a wonderful house for a large family. There's plenty of room for all of us, right?" I nodded in agreement with what they were saying the entire time, giving them the impression that they had won, but a plan was already taking shape in my mind. The following morning, I called my office to arrange a vacation day for the following week, and I then began researching locksmiths. 7 days later, I got up early and dressed as though I was going to work, waited until Sabrina and Tom had left for work, and then sprang into action. The locksmith arrived at 9:00 a.m. As he worked on the locks, I began working on the bedrooms. The 6 months of their lives had spread like an invasive species throughout my house, but I was determined to get rid of everything. So I worked methodically, room by room, packing their clothes, books, toys, and other belongings into cardboard boxes. Their pricey organic groceries were placed in separate boxes, their toiletries were carefully wrapped and packed, the girls' toys and school supplies were arranged. And, as evening drew near, my phone began ringing with calls from Mom, and I watched it ring and ring every time her name flashed on the screen. I was furious, yes, but I wasn't going to be mean about it. By early afternoon, the locksmith had completed installing the new locks, and I had filled my garage with neatly stacked boxes that contained every trace of their presence in my house. I stood in my newly emptied guest rooms, staring at the bare mattresses and empty closets, feeling a strange mix of. I didn't respond to the screen. But then the text message began to arrive. "Emma, where are you? The girls are waiting. This isn't funny, Emma. Come get the kids." Emma answered, so I put my phone on quiet and waited until about 9:30 p.m. When I first heard them come into the driveway, there was the typical sound of kids chatting and car doors slamming, followed by the sudden tinkling of keys against new locks. This is when the confusion began, as I could hear them experimenting with several keys, most likely. Emma Sabrina's voice rang out. The keys aren't working because I changed the locks. I walked to the door, but I didn't open it because I thought they weren't putting them in correctly. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an explosion. "What?" Sabrina screamed. "Open this door right now." I firmly said, I'm done. I'm done paying double utilities. I'm done being your unpaid. I'm tired of watching you waste money while renting my house. Babysitter. I heard the girl begin to cry, and Sabrina took advantage of it right away. She pulled them closer to the door, and you could hear them sobbing. "Emma, look what you're doing to your own nieces," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "If you cared about their stability, you wouldn't have gambled away their home on a get-rich-quick scheme you can't." Tom yelled, "I had every right. This is my house, the house I pay for the house you've been living in for free, while lying to me about finding your own place. I wouldn't have spent 6 months avoiding responsibility while I cleaned up your mess. Just let us in," Sabrina begged, changing tactics. "There's nothing to talk about. Your things are packed in boxes in the garage. You can take them now. You had no right." After several trips to load everything into their car, punctuated by Sabrina's loud complaints and Tom's irate muttering, I finally heard them heading towards the garage. Just when I thought it was over, my phone rang again, and before I could say hello, she screamed, "Mom, how dare you throw your sister out? What kind of person does this to their own family? Sabrina should be living with you. You need to help your sister. I did help her mom for 6 months. It is now your turn to see how you handle having them live with you for 6 months." The queue went dead, and I stood in my empty, quiet house feeling both terrible and relieved. I knew that this was not the end, but for the first time in 6 months, I was able to breathe freely in my own home. The aftermath of that night was exactly what I had anticipated. Within days, my phone was inundated with calls and messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. It seems that Mom had been busy spree. Eventually, I stopped trying to defend myself and let them think what they wanted because I had my peace back, and that was worth more than their approval. I spent hours on the phone with aunts, uncles, and cousins to explain my side of the story, detailing the 6 months of financial strain, broken promises, and constant babysitting, but it was like talking to a wall because they had already made up their minds based on Mom's story of the cruel sister who threw her family out on the street. My friend Rachel called with some shocking news that you won't believe. She was trying to hold back her laughter when she said, "Your parents kicked Sabrina out because they apparently couldn't handle it anymore." She said that they treated her house like a hotel and never helped with anything, which sounded familiar. I couldn't help but laugh. I had to deal with it for 6 months, and my parents couldn't even get through one. However, the real kicker came a few weeks later when my cousin and Jessica reached out. She had always been the family gossip, but for once, I appreciated her propensity to share everything she heard. "Emma, you should hear this." She said that Sabrina and Tom had found a flat, but guess what they're doing with their money? They're investing in a space startup. Sabrina is telling all of her relatives that this will make her wealthy and that she's going to buy a house twice as big as yours. Are you serious? I put my hand to my forehead after everything that had happened, but Jessica went on, "Oh, it gets bet." She came to my house last week with all these fancy presentations about space mining or something, and I felt a strange mix of emotions, including frustration, pity, and a sense of relief that I'd gotten them out before they tried to entice me into another one of their schemes. I don't talk to Sabrina anymore, and occasionally I miss my nieces, but I know that this distance is necessary because I see their pictures on social media. We haven't spoken since that night, but I'm done trying to save her from herself. As for Mom, I heard she's been singing a different tune lately, and last week Jessica told me she actually defended you, saying she finally understands why you did what you did. Apparently, living with Sabrina opened up their world. Sometimes, Sabrina still posts about their exciting investment opportunities and upcoming wealth on the media. Mom may eventually change her mind, and if she does, I'll be here, but this time on my terms. Her eyes showed me how hard it is to share your space with people who don't respect your boundaries. I just grinned when I heard that sometimes people need to go through something themselves before they can understand your perspective.